Chapter 25. Master Drawson Welling escorted me along the cobblestone path wrapping around the chapel and leading to the side door of the dorms. We walked in silence until we were inside. Then he nudged me with his elbow and leaned in to speak just before we entered the library.
You know, my shadow affinity has been at 80% for 11 years.
That's a long time. I covered my mouth at my outburst and peered up and down the rows of doors on either side. When none opened, I whispered, "That's a long time."
Affinity grows through use, but my potential is lower than yours by more than half. If only you could understand the extent of the gifts the goddess has visited upon you. Why, even your mother's affinity is lower.
Is it?
Much. And she's powerful.
Wow, I hope she comes. I meant it. Despite her leaving me, at least I knew she'd done it to keep me from running all my life. There was a certain elegance in that. Love, I supposed.
I'll see she does, one way or another.
We passed through the library, then stopped at the bottom of the spiral stairs leading to my second-floor room. Master Welling gazed at me for a long moment. Not quite long enough for me to grow uncomfortable, but close. When he was done measuring me, he bowed his head for a moment.
Have you given any thought to returning the items Roshan asked for?
Return them or be expelled? Yes, I've given it thought.
I think I can sweeten the offer so it's less of an ultimatum. I could list several reasons your departure would be a sorrowful event for everyone involved, but suffice it to say I would see you survive and thrive.
After meeting in Roshan's gem shop and learning more about the events surrounding my birth and the political state of the region, I was all but prepared to go to the cave, pick up the tomes, except maybe one, and bring them to the priestess. So I cut to the end. I have no intention of leaving the academy. Welling allowed only one of the corners of his lips to rise.
I'm glad to hear it. Do you need an escort to recover the tomes?
And there was the problem. The rock troll occupying the cave outside town might not be friendly. Although he'd saved my life, a glance over my shoulder as I fled injured and bleeding had revealed him carrying the animal over one shoulder, like he planned to make use of it. I might have just made the job of hunting a wolf easier, and the troll might have just taken advantage of the situation. How would he respond to my return? I couldn't guess, but I had to try, and I only planned on waiting until right after class the next day to go. I might have set out as soon as Master Welling passed out of sight in the opposite direction, but one thing a farm girl from the mountains knew for sure was wolves loved to hunt at night. Although daylight didn't promise my safety, I felt better about going then. Besides, the plan I'd formulated as we walked in silence moments before required it. No, I already have an escort. How easily you lie. It wasn't much of a lie, though. I planned to get one as soon as he left. Now, you mentioned how you might make an appetizing offer. Again, he jumped right in.
How would you feel about private training outside your classes?
What kind of training?
The shadow kind. And that's all I'm telling you. You would become my apprentice. Does this interest you?
Hell yes, it interests me. I glanced up and down the hallway. But wouldn't other students be jealous?
The other students are just as out of sorts as you, Tess. They have left their families and their homes behind, also just like you. They're not going to question it this early in their academic careers.
I know a couple who might.
As the Grand Master of the Shadow School of Magic, it's my decision to make.
Magister Lyra and Master Roshan wouldn't object?
We've already discussed it. I sensed your aura in the library when first I saw you.
I recalled the way his eyes had flashed as I passed the desk where he sat and the conversation he'd had with the head lady in the hallway. Had that been when they discussed my fate? It was strange having people discuss me outside my presence, but it was probably common in this world whose social conventions I'd yet come to understand. Would I still be in the light school? He nodded.
Roshan would have it no other way. The dangers of being a powerful shadow magician can be countered by familiarity with the light, and Roshan has some experience with this.
But she's just 3 years my senior. How does she have so much experience?
She's lived a lifetime in the last 2 years, but these stories are hers to tell. In the meantime, the priestess plans to keep you well within her sight. It won't be negotiable in your first year, and now that she knows your affinity and potential, it might never be.
All I wanted to know was that I could continue to attend classes with Shabana. The past was the past, and I'd hope she'd be true to her word about watching my back. If so, I'd certainly keep her interests close to my heart. The offer to train me in shadow while I attended light classes seemed like a perfect way to maintain the magical balance I'd learned about in the shop. I accept with gratitude, Master Welling. I hope I won't disappoint you. He smiled.
Tess, you'd have to try to disappoint me with potential like yours. You'll see.
He turned up the hallway and headed back toward the library.
Return the materials tomorrow so Rashan will get out of my ear.
Okay, I'll do everything I can, although I still wasn't sure my lame plan would work. I climbed the stairs, moved down the hallway, then stopped in front of Shabana's door. I rapped gently. Footfalls were followed by the door swinging open. She twisted a knuckle against one eyelid. I guess I woke you. She shook her head. It's okay. Did your boss have you working late? I shook my head. No, I had to make a stop to talk with a couple of the masters. One eyebrow cocked as the other lowered as the remnants of sleep vanished from her expression. The masters? She grabbed my wrist, then yanked me inside. Tell me about it. The door slammed without discussion. I noted her bedding had been replaced, but didn't inquire. First, I need to ask you for a favor. She shrugged. Anything. Name it. Would you be up for a little adventure outside the walls tomorrow, since it's our free day? Her mouth formed an O. Ooh, what kind of adventure? The kind where you'll want your staff and a good pair of shoes in which to run. I only have the single pair of sandals. She waved the thought away. But I can run barefoot. I'm fast. This I know. Just don't leave me behind. Her eyelids squinted for just a flash in time. Then she lowered her head in a single nod. I never make the same mistake twice. I hoped that was true. Glad to hear it. Now, the masters. Tell me. Her wide-mouthed smile of sharp ivory teeth brought out one of my own. Sleep evaded me as contradicting thoughts about my father flooded my mind in a repetitive loop. After Master Welling shocked me with the news that my mother lived, my silent room made for a breeding den of conflict. On one side of my inner struggle scrolled visual images of Baba's smiling face, the way he encouraged me when I repaired a fence for the first time without his aid, or how I applied leather repair techniques he taught me to sewing cloth. But the contrasting narrative proved strong as well. He'd lied to me, told me my mother was dead. When I recalled how my interface rearranged itself upon his demise and how I started gaining new skill points I didn't know existed, the extent of his deception came into focus. To go so far as to mask my mana pool until I became unbound could serve two purposes. It would keep people from seeing it and reporting me to the authorities as an unregistered magician, a danger I knew little about at the time. And it would keep my curiosity at bay, which equated to stifling my potential. Although part of me understood why he'd done what he did, I couldn't ignore the sickening feeling his betrayal had caused. Delusions about the man who raised me were a poison stalk wilting the flower of my childhood. I didn't know the man who suddenly called magic armor from his walls and burst into the open to face the demon horde. It erased my entire perception of who he was. Actually, who he'd once been. I rolled over in frustration too many times to count and scoured my mind for hours in search of a distraction. Finally, I thought focusing on the future might help suppress my confusion over the past. Indeed, it was much brighter than it'd been just one night before. Roshan struck me as sincere when I revisited the encounter. Although I'd seen a dark side of the priestess, despite her light aura, when she initially reprimanded me for hiding my true self, the way she had embraced me and shown her understanding of my predicament and the resulting choice had filled me with warmth. For Master Welling's part, I was reassured by his offer to tutor me. It was a boon to be promised advancement by a man the mysterious Shadow Council trained in magic. Even more so to have the priestess offer to protect me from the supposed dangers of being a shadowcaster by training me in the light. I was getting the best of both realms. Chapter 26. Free Day. The first since we'd arrived at the academy, and I planned to use it by risking my backside so I could recover the tomes to prove my good faith to the masters. Sometimes I wondered if my head was properly attached to my spine. I knocked on Shabana's door at first light, then we set out with our staves strapped on tight. In the interest of prudence, we walked to the altar when we entered the chapel to ensure the priestess hadn't shown up yet. All I needed was for her to catch us returning to the grate and learning I'd stored the tomes outside the safety of the academy premises. It wasn't a time to have her questioning my judgment, more than she might already. We passed into the field outside the hidden door near the metal bars. The rising sun was at our backs, painting the rocky terrain in the distance in a soft orange glow. Specks of metal cut into the rocks reflected by Daystar brilliantly. The high grass swooshed at our hips, and Shabana's head swiveled left and right in slow motion. "Are you scanning for predators?" The Michonne nodded and continued to scan as she replied. "My pride had 4 locations in the north and migrated between them with the changing seasons. A watchful eye is best in the wild lands of tigers, grizzlies, and white lions. I suppose it's a habit that's hard to unlearn." "I wouldn't ask you to." I scanned our surroundings with her. Last time I was out here, a wolf attacked me. If it hadn't been for Rashawn's timely appearance at the top of the tube ladder, I might have passed. Her head stopped swiveling and she locked her gaze on me. "You might have mentioned there were wolves out here. What level was it?" "I don't recall." She shot out a short breath. "Open your interface, then go to the log tab. Select the combat subtab and trace it to the conflict with the wolf." She shied. "It's like you grew up on a farm or something." Even in jest, your words prick at my self-esteem. I scanned my interface and focused on the tab she mentioned. When I thought the word wolf, it scrolled to the spot I sought. The goddess was a wonder. Plains wolf. While most wolves travel in packs, plains wolves are a territorial and competitive breed that often end up going it alone. Level 9, Beast. Melee power rating, 17. Melee defense rating, 7. Ranged power rating, 1. Ranged defense rating, 1. Magic power rating, 1. Magic resistance rating, 1. The wolf was level 9. Okay. That's not so bad with the 2 of us, but it could still be a stretch. We should be cautious, and if one presents itself, we should try to get on either side of it so one of us can strike while it focuses on the other. This way we can confuse and cause it to turn back and forth between us. Maybe it will decide we're not worth the risk and move on. What I'd give for an offensive spell." She gripped my hand. "As to your self-esteem, your words indicate your father emphasized schooling. I'm sometimes taken aback that the farm girl speaks with such eloquence. And to spare your precious ego, you should recall I, too, am a farmer. Or was." Although I could have droned on for hours about just how much my father insisted I read and learned numbers, the last thing I needed was another endless flood of conflicting thoughts to distract me while we were outside the gates and my focus was better spent on surviving. My father didn't raise an idiot. This is true. I pointed a finger. The cave is just around the lip of that jagged outcropping. We should approach with care. I'm still thinking about the wolf. I raised a hand when we came to the outcropping and peeked around it to gaze into the dim cave. Solara's star cast its light against the rocks to project a shadow into the mouth. Nothing inner illumination couldn't remedy. My initial glance proved promising, and I waved her forward. When we reached the bend in the cave, I peered around it to spy the chair-like stone. Empty. "The troll's not here. Come, let's move." I began to circle the stone, then stopped. "What is it?" Shabana threw a glance over one shoulder toward the mouth of the cave. "Did you hear something?" I hadn't heard anything, but her words presented an opportunity. "Would you mind standing watch?" "Good idea, in case it comes back, right?" She winked. "I'll just stand here, at the bend." Maybe I hadn't considered the endeavor thoroughly. While bringing a Michonne who I'd seen swing a staff with determination and accuracy was wise, I hadn't followed through on the planning piece. If I uncovered the tomes in front of her, she'd also see the leather-encased scrolls I deposited. There were 11 of them, and I had no intention of returning those. I was aware keeping them for myself amounted to a betrayal, but Roshan and Master Welling didn't know about the scrolls, and the knowledge they contained might be my only chance to excel faster when I reached a high enough level to meet the requirements to read them. When I uncovered the stockpile, however, I still hesitated, staring at the dusty leather cylinders. If you give them back, someone else will gain the benefits instead of you. Why should that be so? I pulled my lips into my mouth, then nodded. My inner voice was right once again. I'd discovered the scrolls and tomes, and I planned to return all the volumes, save for one, the one I could read clearly. While I hoped returning them would provide opportunity for me to study them under Master Welling's tutelage, there were no guarantees they wouldn't burn that very night in Magister Lyra's oversized fireplace. There'd be no parting with the scrolls. After I'd stacked the tomes on the stone, I glared at the other treasures, then up at Shabana. Once I'd confirmed her gaze was locked on the mouth of the cave, I grabbed the 2 cylinders I recollected held scrolls with the lowest level requirements, then stuffed them underneath my robe where the strap holding my staff secured them to my back. The way the garment flowed revealed nothing of my curves beneath, so hopefully the cylinders wouldn't show and I could smuggle them back to my room. When I'd stacked the volumes on the stone, I covered the remaining scrolls then stood. Okay, let's get these back. Shabana sauntered over, then eyed the stack. Her hands crossed over her chest and she rubbed her shoulders against a chill. Wow, what are they about? I can't read them yet. They must be flooded with shadow magic. My blood freezes in my veins at their proximity. Think you can suffer through it, or should I go find a shadow student to help lug them? She dropped her hands. I've survived the high snows of the wildlands. I'm sure I'll be fine. She hoisted half the pile with some effort. I snatched the other half, and to see Shabana struggling under the weight of hers, I thanked Solara my father had subjected me to the kind of hard work that increased my strength attribute. Best I could tell, the Michonne was all dexterity. At the same time, I wished I'd owned a bag that could manage their weight. Maybe I could convert some of my earnings from Luli to buy one. This is going to take forever. Shabana raised a knee to lift the books for a better grasp. Just be ready to drop them if you see a wolf, I smiled. Dropping them won't be a problem. Oh, I set my books on the dusty floor of the cave. I almost forgot. Reaching into the bag that usually held my Constitution class clothing, I grabbed the cloth in which I'd wrapped 10 fruit rolls the night before. I set them on the chair, then picked up the books. Shabana gazed at me questioningly when I rose. For the troll. I saw him eating this fruit the other night before he saved me from the wolf. I wanted to find a way to thank him, even if I can't trust he won't snap me in half. Your generosity pleases the goddess. Plus 10 light points. Current disposition, neutral. Current rank, light, plus 5, out of 250. Next threshold, trusted. Shabana nodded. You're a sweet soul. Come. A shadow fell across her. I jerked my head up to spy a lumbering figure with huge shoulders glaring back at me. The rock troll had returned to its cave. Although I couldn't spy his facial features, his head swiveled as if he snatched looks at each of us in turn. Then he lurched forward. The books in my hands tumbled to the ground.